Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we're going to cover lesson 16 of the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 17, and it's called Let the Healings Begin. In our previous three chapters in the Gospel of Matthew, we studied the beginning of the ministry of Jesus at the Sermon on the Mount. With his words, Jesus began his healing ministry as depicted in this gospel with words to heal the hearts and minds of the people he came to save. In Matthew's chapters 8 and 9, Matthew's focus turns to the physical healings that Jesus performed, and there are 12 different miracles in these two chapters, 6 different miracles in each. Interestingly, most of these reveal a slightly different category or realm. Before Jesus, the Gentiles had beliefs in healers, most of them pertaining to the plethora of Greek and Roman gods they worshipped. Heracles is an example, called Hercules by the Romans. But there's quite a difference between a belief or hope and action. Jesus healed so many people that his power was undisputed. But where that power came from would be the biggest question. Of course, the Pharisees claimed that the power of Jesus came from Satan. Let's read the first passage. Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 4 says this: When he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him, and behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, See that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Because Matthew's gospel does not follow a linear timeline, we cannot know if the multitudes following Jesus followed him for his words, as we can see in the Sermon on the Mount, or for the physical healings. My guess is that the majority of the people were following Jesus because of the healing. This leper, though, knew that Jesus was God and worshiped him. As we can see in this first miracle of Jesus, specifically mentioned by Matthew, the leper approached Jesus and stated that he knew Jesus could make him clean if he was willing. This was not a private or semi-private event. Great multitudes were following Jesus. It is interesting that this first miracle depicted in Matthew involved leprosy. The Jewish people equated leprosy with sin, and it also was thought to be incurable. It also was viewed as punishment from God. Those with leprosy were removed from society, and when anyone else was around, by the law, they would have to announce that they were unclean to everyone in earshot. In fact, God gave Moses many levels of instructions on dealing with leprosy, lepers, the clothing of lepers, and even the housing of lepers, in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. In 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 17, we are told of Elisha healing Naaman, a Syrian army captain, by having the leprous man wash in the Jordan River to be healed. In this passage, notice that the leper does not announce his uncleanness to Jesus, nor does Jesus shun the leper in fear, as everyone else would have done. Spiritually, do not lose sight of the symbolic aspect of leprosy, as it points directly to our sin. All it takes is one sin to make us unclean in the presence of God. But God has given us a way of dealing with that sin. We can read about leper colonies. A Catholic priest named Father Damien began a leper colony in Molokai, Hawaii, that existed from 1866 to 1969. Eventually, Father Damien also became a leper and died from leprosy. It would take a compassionate heart to devote one's life to people who had been removed from society while risking personal infection. We can know much about the leper who came to Jesus that day without any explanation. Based on the process described in Leviticus, this man had not been touched since the day the Levite priest had diagnosed him as a leper. He never had been able to say goodbye to his wife or children, and though they likely brought food to a remote location, he could only observe them from a distance. Our culture does not have anything like this, but it reminds me a bit of people with AIDS before scientists knew how that disease was being spread. Certainly, those with advanced stages were noticeable, like walking skeletons, and no one dared get near them or hug them. Without any question, Jesus touched this leper, and it was the first time that he had been touched in many, many years. The leper asked Jesus if he was willing to heal him, and Jesus instantaneously responded, "I am willing, be cleansed." And as quick as that, the man's leprosy was gone. Jesus told the now ex-leper to tell no one but the priest and follow the Old Testament law by offering the gift of 2 live birds, cedar wood, scarlet string, and hyssop to be used in a symbolic ceremony. By the law, this ceremony would occur outside the camp. And do not miss the significance that when our sins were placed upon Jesus, he was crucified outside the camp. Jesus touched the leper physically and spiritually, and healing occurred. Why would Jesus instruct the man to tell no one? I think Jesus wanted the people to equate the miracles from God with God's love, rather than just an ostentatious display of power. Mark wrote this in Mark chapter 6, verse 34. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. Mark also reminds us that this leper told many people. After meeting with the priest, imagine the leper telling his family. Physical healings without a heart change will not change a person's eternal destination. And that was the primary focus of Jesus. Okay, let's read the next passage. Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13 says this. Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented." And Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." The centurion answered and said, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, "Assuredly, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you." And his servant was healed that same hour. Notice that early on, Jesus was not just healing the Jews whom he had come to save. He also healed Gentiles. And Matthew tells us about the faith of this Roman soldier. This centurion went out of his way in concern for his servant. That reveals a softness of heart that was not prevalent. The centurion had an abundance of faith telling Jesus that he knew he did not need to come to the centurion's house to perform the miracle. But knowing Jesus had the power to just speak and the miracle would occur. Jesus can touch our hearts, souls, bodies, and minds spiritually and perform miracles in our lives. It is interesting that Jesus marveled at the faith of this centurion, and the only other time that a verse in the Bible describes Jesus marveling is here. Mark 6, verse 6 says this, "And he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the villages in a circuit teaching." Jesus was filled with wonder at the belief of this Gentile and filled with wonder at the disbelief of the Jewish people he came to save. In this verse, Jesus speaks of the eternal damnation based on the disbelief of many Jews. This should remind all of us that it all comes down to belief. We may be born into a Christian family, baptized as a baby, or maybe we have attended a church service every single Sunday for all of our lives. But if we do not believe, it will not matter. Let's read the next section. Matthew chapter 8, verses 14 through 15 says this. "Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them." Jesus healed a leper, a man with a seemingly incurable disease, and then healed a man who was paralyzed. As this servant worked for a soldier, I visualize a spinal cord injury or brain injury, but we do not know the cause of the paralysis. Peter's mother-in-law had a fever, and it could have been that this was more deadly than the other two people Jesus healed. We forget about the differences between disease and illness in the days of the Bible and in our lives today. There were no antibiotics. Scientists estimate that life expectancy would drop to around the age of 50 worldwide if we did not have antibiotics. But this healing by Jesus was more of a personal nature. Jesus had called Peter away from his life as a fisherman, and in many ways, Peter's focus upon his own family had to have been affected. Imagine the crowds and the length of days that the ministry of Jesus must have entailed. Fortunately for Peter, the ministry of Jesus was headquartered in Capernaum, and that also was where Peter, his wife, and mother-in-law lived. In numerous miracles by Jesus, he fed multitudes of people. And notice that after this miracle, the person who was healed fed Jesus. Jesus merely touched her hand and she was healed. Okay, let's read our final passage today. Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 through 17 says this. "When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses." Now we notice something quite different. Jesus begins to heal those who are demon-possessed. It has occurred to me that the Bible identifies many people who are demon-possessed. Most of us are aware of demon possession due to horror movies like The Exorcist. But when is the last time someone's malady was described as demon possession in the news media today? The biggest question that comes to mind, whether or not demon possession still occurs today. Absolutely. But science likely will call it something else, like mental illness. We can call it schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, or even gender dysphoria. My guess is that all of these are satanic influences affecting the lives of people. Also be encouraged that a true believer in Jesus cannot be demon-possessed. Demon oppression, on the other hand, can occur and does occur. What is the difference between the two? Well, to be possessed is to have a demon inhabit the body and take over the body. To be oppressed is to be influenced by demons, burdened, weighed down. Do not forget that Satan uses the world and the things of the world to draw man into sin, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Feed the Spirit, and the Spirit will grow. Feed the flesh, and the flesh will grow. If we keep our eyes on Jesus, we will not stumble. Like a tree planted in the water, we shall not be moved, from Psalm 1:3. All Jesus needed to do is cast out demons was to speak a word. That demonstrates authority. After all, Jesus is the Creator, and angels, even those who chose to depart heaven, still are created beings. They have no power over Jesus, nor any power over a single person if Jesus chooses to remove them. In this first half of Matthew 8, Jesus healed many people, as in this fourth miracle described by Matthew in this chapter. There were many who were demon-possessed, and Jesus healed all who were sick. Jesus accomplished these first four miracles in a variety of ways. Some he touched, another Jesus healed remotely without touching. In this fourth miracle, Jesus just spoke a word. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. What is common in all these healings? Well, everyone was sick, afflicted. That's the human condition. Our bodies have gone from incorruption to corruption ever since the sin of Adam. We are on a treadmill that leads to physical death. There are many people who argue the existence of God, specifically a benevolent God based on the sickness, death, and evil that exists in the world. Yet the world is not evil because of anything God did. It is man who chose to rebel against God. God did not choose to abandon man. And even with man's rebellion, God found another way. God became man. He shed incorruption and put on corruption. Jesus came to live, suffer, and die as a man, and in that amazing process, give us a way of escaping the spiritual death to come. Jesus performed many miracles as depicted in the first half of this chapter we have read today. But more importantly, Jesus continues to perform miracles in the lives of those who come to him. Come, all those who labor, and he will give rest for your souls. I was blind, and now I see. Was lame, and now I walk. Was dead in my sins, and now live in the abundance of eternal life in, by, and through Jesus. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.